Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to talk about our upcoming book, Crawl, Walk, Run, and what inspired us to publish this book, and talk about digital transformation, talk about digital analytics maturity, and many other fun topics around what makes organizations great from the digital standpoint and why many organizations are not successful, and what you can do to leverage digital to really turn your business around. So lots of exciting topics for us to cover today. A big part of the conversation will be around governance and how that fits into your overall digital strategy. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. There is a chat panel, so if you have any questions, such as will the webinar and the PowerPoint presentation be shared? Absolutely, both will be shared. So you're welcome to share the copy of this webinar with your colleagues. Additionally, you can ask any questions, and we will address those questions as we go through our webinar today. Please use Zoom chat panel. We are monitoring it right now, and we will reply as we see questions come in. Our intention is for the webinar to take about 45 minutes or so. So we also have some time to answer questions at the end of the webinar. And certainly, throughout this program, we are going to be answering questions. So thank you for joining. We are very excited to get started and share with you what we've been working on for the past what seems like 9 months, but really there's all the information that came into this book and will be featured in this book probably took a lot more years to put together, as we've been working with many enterprises on what a digital transformation actually means for them. So let me introduce our presenters today. My name is Michael Loban. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at InfoTrust, and I'm joined by my colleague, Lucas Long.
Yes, my name is Lucas. I'm our product manager for InfoTrust's tag auditing and monitoring platform, Tag Inspector. And then as an extension of that, work with a number of our global partners on all things governance, which is one of the topics that we'll be digging into today.
Thank you, Lucas. Throughout the webinar, we are going to go back and forth in terms of content. I will talk a little bit about the book itself, the structure of the book, and why we decided to write it and what we decided to include in the book. And Lucas is going to talk about data governance and how it falls into digital analytics maturity that every organization is going through. Just a quick word about InfoTrust. InfoTrust is a digital analytics consultancy. We are fully certified in Google platforms such as Google Marketing Platform that includes Google Analytics, the 360, Google Tag Manager, Google Optimize. We're also a Google Cloud partner. And InfoTrust works with many different global brands to help them optimize their data collection, data management, and understanding of their marketing data to hopefully optimize their business. As a digital analytics consultancy, we do not sell media, we do not run advertising campaigns, but prefer to focus on data collection, data governance, and data analysis. And additionally, as Lucas mentioned, we also have our own solutions, such as Tag Inspector. And the work that we do and the work that we've covered in the book is really based on our experience of working with many global brands, Fortune 500 companies, and helping them leverage data, leverage digital analytics to improve their business. So as far as our agenda and what you can expect to hear today, first I will just give a quick overview of why we actually decided to write another book. There is certainly no shortage of books. I will talk about marketing frameworks that we've used in the books and how they work together. And then we'll dive into customer data governance as one of the key components, really the foundational component of organizations' digital strategy. And then we'll talk about the next steps, what you can do to get the book when it becomes available later this summer or in the beginning of September, and the number of resources that you can leverage right now, even before the book is published. As I was working on the final chapters of the book, somebody asked me, so what actually motivated you to write this book? And it's been a long journey, as we've been working on this project for many months now. But it really comes down to a phone call that I received a couple of years ago. And I distinctly remember a call. I was at the airport, and the call was from the newly appointed CIO of one of the largest enterprises, one of the largest CPG enterprises. And the person was calling me as we worked before at his previous job. And the conversation started something along the lines of, hey, I'm now in this new position, and we really need to turn around how we use data within the business. So what did that actually mean? The first question was, how do we build a team? Right now, we have many brands, we have many business units across over 100 different countries. And we need to centralize who does digital, how digital is being done across the organization, because right now there's not that many standards, and different people are using information very sporadically and in different ways. We need centralized architecture and better system management. And certainly that's important. When you have such a large business, it's very easy to spend millions of dollars on digital inefficiencies, right? If you have more than one website, how do you know that page view means the same thing? How do you ensure that data that is being collected from every single website actually meets the standards of and regulations of different countries, of different markets that you're in, and is done in the same fashion? A lot of times we look at the data warehouse that everyone is now aiming to build, and we realize, well, it's great that we have this data, but the quality of the data is actually not usable. So we need to fix the problem at the data collection stage before we can start doing cool things like customer lifetime value and predictive analysis. And the big component was a number of years ago when we had this conversation, he already was thinking about how do we build in-house capabilities. Working with different agencies, working with different media partners is extremely powerful, and you certainly want to bring the right partners to help execute different campaigns. But how do you remove reliance on an agency, and if needed, have all the capabilities in-house to run your own media, to build your own data warehouse, to have access to first-party data? Because now, as we all know, data is the new oil, but if you are not able to collect data yourself, then you're really wasting what can be one of the most powerful resources for the organization. Governance and controls, these changing regulations. At that point, people were just beginning to talk about GDPR. CCPA was being formatted, and it was becoming a very important question. How do we not just become compliant, but how do we ensure that we stay compliant as an organization? How do we manage our media? And how do we grow our direct-to-consumer capabilities? Now, we have attained this, people that joined this webinar from many different organizations. And I'm confident that some of these topics, or or maybe all of these topics resonate with different people that we have, right? Some of us are trying to build or upskill our teams. Some are trying to launch new brands or new direct-to-consumer experiences. Some are just trying to have a better management of digital assets within the organization. And as we were looking at this list of everything that this enterprise wanted to accomplish, it became very clear that this is just not specific to this company. Yes, how we will execute it is going to be very specific to them, but ultimately many organizations are going through the same digital evolution, and many organizations are beginning to ask these questions. And hey, if you already are working on addressing them, then you understand the value of this, and you are developing appetite, so you want to do more, you want to invest more in this. And so the book, this Crawl, Walk, Run idea came to us as the way to think about hey, digital analytics, digital transformation, it's an evolution. Change is inevitable, but progress is a choice, right? That's something that we make the decision. We as a company, we want to excel in digital. We want to leverage these new data capabilities to bring our business forward. And we decided to write this book to really showcase how different organizations transition from a crawling often stage when it comes to their data, when it comes to analytics, to a walking stage, to a running stage. And since there are so many different solutions that we can use, we decided to focus on how do we advance our digital analytics maturity, not just with hundreds of different products, but specifically with Google Marketing Platform as a solution of choice. So that's what the book is about, and this is how the book came to be. It really is a summary of everything that we've learned during these digital transformation projects with many enterprises, and measuring the success of those projects, right? How do we ensure that digital transformation actually generates business results and business value for the company? And we've been fortunate that writing this book to get praise from many different people, including Neil Owen, Chief Measurement Strategist at Google, including Global CIO and GBS Officer at Mondelez, and Jeff Hoffman, co-founder of Priceline and Ubit.com, as well as many other people who had the chance to preview this book and share with us how they liked it and how beneficial they found the content. And this book was written by many people within InfoTrust, because we wanted to make sure that people that specialize in things like governance, for example, like Lucas, people that specialize in attribution, all participate and contribute their knowledge to this book. So this book has a lot of authors, contributing authors. In terms of book structure and what we decided to include, it's interesting that for every chapter that we wanted to include in the book, we had to say no to probably 10 other chapters. It's always difficult to cut, but it's probably one of the most important decisions that as authors we had to make, because we had to make this focused effort, right? There's certainly hundreds of books on digital and transformation, so you can write 5 or 6 books on the topic, but we wanted to make sure that you can actually use this when at the job, right? When you come in at an organization and you ask to make changes, you ask to make digital transformation within the business, you ask to advance analytics maturity within the company, this book can be your how-to resource and not just a book on overall digital management practices. So the way we structured the book, similar to what I'm sharing with you today, we started with why Crawl, Walk, Run, why this idea of how organizations progress. We'll talk about digital analytics frameworks, and we'll actually spend a few minutes next talking about 2 main frameworks that we've used in this book. Then we put together a couple of chapters on technical deep dive, some of the most pressing technical topics that probably people discuss in today's environment. We'll talk about customer data governance. In the book, we also talk about Google Marketing Platform and all the products that are part of the marketing platform and how they work together. We'll talk about app plus web properties, which is a big change that Google has been announcing that is coming up in terms of the measurement strategy. And we'll talk about attribution, what it is, and how it's changing in light of all the privacy changes that are happening in today's landscape. And certainly we talk about cloud, because every organization these days is working to build a data warehouse or figure out how to make data warehouse impact positively their business. It feels like everyone that I talk to wants a data warehouse, but few organizations actually are able to determine how that creation of that data warehouse will translate to driving their business forward. And then what we've done is we said, well, great, we have these frameworks, we have this technical deep dive and technical topics that we want people to understand, but how does actually this come together? And so what we've done is we've put together a couple of chapters on bringing these technical topics and the digital analytics framework to CPG space, consumer packaged goods, into direct-to-consumer and e-commerce space, and into news and media. And then we spend the rest of the book talking about executing change because, hey, change is not easy. And we wanted to give a couple of advices based on executing this with other partners on what are the things that make this change last within the organization. I think all of us are, to a certain extent, fed up with an integration project that is scheduled to be completed in 3 years, or some kind of tool deployment process that never seems to end. A lot of times, there is an integration project that was started by people that are no longer with the company. Those types of initiatives that ultimately do not actually generate ROI are very wasteful for the business and can often take the business down. So how do we avoid that? So let's dive in and talk a little bit about the marketing framework and why frameworks are so important, why we are spending time in this book to talk about marketing frameworks. You know, I like this picture that I discovered not too long ago, who led the digital transformation for your company. A lot of times over the past 3 months, we've been hearing, hey, this is happening to us. What do we do? Many people have talked about digital transformation and, hey, it's time for us to be better at this, but no one was kind of taking it as serious as they had to. But now it seems like with COVID-19 and the state of the world, it's time for us to actually make the change. But when the organization decides to make the change, how do you track progress in terms of digital transformation? Some of us are just getting started. Some of us already have extensive teams. So it's important to have a map and be able to determine here's where we are on the map and here's where we want to go and the different stages that can get us there. So as the basis for this methodology, we've used a model that Boston Consulting Group has put together with Google, where they demonstrate 4 stages of digital analytics maturity. And after surveying different organizations, Boston Consulting Group saw that there is an up to 30% increase in cost efficiency savings and 20% increase in revenue when the organization is able to progress on a digital analytics scale. So Boston Consulting Group and Google introduced 4 different stages of this. Some organizations are in a nascent stage. Some organizations are in emerging stage, some in connected stage, and some in multi-moment stage. The reason this is so valuable is, first, so you can actually understand where your business is right now, because based on where your business is right now, you can determine what you should be doing next. And three, so you understand where you actually want to end up. Organizations that are in a nascent stage, and there's actually a survey that you can leverage to help you determine where you are. They're media-centric, and they tend to look just at one campaign at a time, right? So we look at data as the way to simply tell us, was this Facebook or AdWords or Pinterest campaign effective or not? Those organizations that begin as emerging are the ones that now begin to think about technical or technology stack. How do we bring different solutions together? How, instead of having a multitude of spreadsheets and different dashboards, we bring our technology and platforms together so they talk to each other. And then as the next step, they become data-centric, right? Data integrated and activated across different channels. And the organization is actually able to determine the ROI behind their investment in analytics. And finally, the organizations become multi-moment, where they're able to use data to predict what is likely to happen to their business, what is likely to happen to their customers, and how they can impact outcomes in a desired way. As we were looking at these 4 stages, the question started to occur to us, well, but how do we actually move from one stage to another? Is there a mechanism that can help us move from the emerging stage to connected stage? Because there's a lot that needs to happen. It's not just easy to say, well, if we integrate this platform, we are going to become connected. Or if we are going to hire 10 more people, we are going to become multi-moment. So what became obvious to us is there's got to be a mechanism that helps us move from one phase to another phase to another phase. And the mechanics of this we documented in our own methodology called the 6 P's of digital analytics transformation, where we outline 6 ingredients that you need to work through to really move your business from one phase to another phase. So what are they? Well, first, it's purpose, right? We need to focus on why we're actually doing this and what needs to be fixed. Okay? So we make the decision that, hey, right now we are in advanced stage and we need to be moving to multi-moment stage. And here's why, right? The business why of doing this. Then when we begin the change or when we begin transformation to another phase, well, it just doesn't happen overnight. And it also does not happen when you simply integrate digital analytics with your CRM or with your loyalty program. There are really 3 components. We need to make sure that we have the right people. We need to make sure that we have the right platforms. And we need to help our people use our platforms in the right way, through the right process. And then we need to measure our pace and payoff. And thinking about this, we actually tend to start with the pace and payoff first. So what can we do right now within the next 3 to 6 months? What activities are going to generate us the most value? And where can we be focusing as a business to make sure that we, A, move faster, and 2, that all of these activities are actually generating more revenue and make us more profitable. Then we need to make sure that our teams are rightly staffed. We have the right platforms and the platforms are integrated together. And then we have the right processes in place. So these are the three levels of execution. And a lot of times, what we notice is within organizations, platforms is what everyone tends to pay attention to. We want that new DMP. We want that new CDP. We want to bring all of those solutions together. But even when we do it, we still are perplexed at how should we use them to drive our business forward. That's why we tend to focus on all three of those. From the platform side, obviously, we highly recommend one integrated platform where data can travel from one platform to another flawlessly and avoiding manual types of integrations. Simply because whenever you move one data from another data and that happens manually versus automatically, you generate a lot of inefficiencies. And those inefficiencies can cost money and also drive a lot of waste. From the people standpoint, the question is, do we have the right teams? If we have the right team, is the team upskilled to actually use all the platforms? And then do we go and we bring in additional partners? Do we have the right partners in place to help move our business forward? And one of the things that is quite common or became quite common over the past 2 years is the idea of in-house, right? So how do we minimize the reliance on third parties and build our own team within our business that is able to execute all of our campaigns? And one of the driving needs behind this was companies realized that they need to move faster. Campaigns need to be understood, measured in real time, and organizations might want to optimize their media spend and how they actually run advertising campaigns in real time. Hence, having access to this information themselves and the ability to use this information themselves is so valuable. And then from the processes standpoint, what activities should we be focusing on? And some of the activities that we really see quite valuable are rethinking customer lifetime value and what are actually more profitable customer segments that we need to be going after, measurement and experimentation, automation where possible to cut waste, and attribution. And certainly from the purpose standpoint, it always comes down to, well, how do we continue to focus on our customer and ensuring that our customer understands why they should be buying from us versus our competition. And with that, let's talk about customer data governance, which is one of the underlying aspects of anything digital, because if you cannot collect the data in a proper, compliant way, nothing else is really going to work.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And so what we've really been talking about thus far are obviously the two different frameworks. So one, the framework that you can think of for the maturity and how far along you are when thinking about digital transformation. So when we're talking about the nascent, emerging, connected, and then the multi-moment stages, it's great, and those different stages are great to think about and try to place yourself along the spectrum for how you're actioning data. Oftentimes the questions that we'll get, and where we work a lot with partner organizations, is how to move along those maturity stages. So within those, there's a few different actions and a few different items that are really focused on really within each of those different stages. When we think about kind of the three main areas there, at the foundation within the nascent and the emerging stages, we're really talking about digital architecture and then data governance. Once you have all of that in place, so we're collecting in a compliant and complete way all of the data necessary to drive our marketing, media, and analytics activities, That's when we get into those platform integrations and really being able to drive holistic business insights. Once you're able to really perfect those different activities, usually within that emerging and connection actionability stage, you can then move into that multi-moment stage where we're starting to look at and forecasting future predictive types of analytics and a lot more data science, really heavy analysis. So those are really the stages that you're working through as far as the actions that are being taken to move along that maturity model. The foundational piece of this, and what we really want to focus on in this section, and it's a big focus within the book as well, is looking through the lens of what we're talking about for the 6 Ps and such, is that first foundational stage of digital architecture and data governance. Now, oftentimes when you hear people talking about data governance, you hear people just referring to, are you collecting all the data that you should be? Are all the platforms in place as they should be? Are they loading correctly all the time? But that's only one piece. So when we talk about data governance, we're really looking at a more holistic model where we're focusing on, number one, data privacy and compliance. So making sure that you're collecting compliant data. Number two, data collection architecture. So all of those really important items of, what are the platforms that are in place? What are the data points that are necessary to drive those platforms and the activities that they are really pushing for your business? And then three, it's really important to also consider when thinking about governance and thinking about that architecture, also performance. And we're talking about performance here more from the technical perspective. One really big internal driver within any organization, regardless of the vertical or regardless of who the audience is making sure that you have a good user experience and everything is loading quickly and effectively. The overall data collection architecture and the different platforms and analytics tools that you have in place and running to drive those marketing goals and get to those purposes that you have for your digital properties, all of those things can impact the performance and the user experience. So it's really important to keep that in mind as a part of that digital or the data governance program overall. So when we think about these 3 really pillars of data governance, and we look at them through those 3 Ps, the 6 Ps, the 3 of which that are really speaking to the kind of action steps, as Michael had talked about before, are around people, platforms, and then processes. So let's explore those different data governance pillars through the lens of those aspects of the framework. So when we're talking about compliance and privacy, a really basic question that we always get is who needs to be involved with this? Oftentimes, either, especially when working through CCPA readiness or GDPR readiness, you're getting legal requests and legal requirements being pushed to the marketing team. No one understands, marketers don't understand the legal requirements, and then the legal teams don't understand the kind of technical aspects that the marketing team and the analytics team and the development teams are really having to deal with. So they don't understand the application of those different legal requirements. This is where it's really important for an overall data governance program to be able to bridge that gap. So the people really necessary in order to be effective in these efforts is a cross-functional team. We need to include individuals from the marketing team so we can understand the purpose. How are we using data? What is the effect on our users? We need to include individuals from the legal organization so we understand the specific requirements as outlined by the different laws and regulations. Individuals in the analytics team need to be involved because they're typically the ones that are really driving and have a deep understanding of exactly what data points are being collected about our users, about the context of what they're consuming on the websites. And then we also need to have members of the development team that are involved as well, because they're the ones setting up that technical architecture, and again, can have really good insights into what's being collected and the methods via which that is happening. When we think about platforms in the context of compliance and privacy, we really need to first understand just the business assessment of the technology stack that's in place. So what are all of the different platforms via which we're collecting data across our digital assets? Where through that entire downstream line is that data going? How are we using it? And at first, just taking an inventory of what are all of those different platforms that are even in use. Who are the owners of those different platforms? What teams are involved? And then again, how are we using the information or the data that's being pumped into each of those different tools? From there, we can begin to understand what are the things that we actually are aware of that are necessary for the purpose that we've outlined for our different marketing and analytics activities, and then go through and really trim the fat. So get rid of anything that's not necessary, and then just be sitting there with the currently active and really leveraged platforms that are still in use. And then for all of those, we're going to need to go through more granular compliance and privacy assessments. So looking at the data that's being collected and used, doing specific assessments around GDPR, around CCPA, around e-privacy if you're in Europe, any other relevant regulations and privacy requirements that your legal team is going to make you aware of. By going through understanding those platforms that are in place, understanding the data that's being collected from each, we're able to ask really pointed questions of that data to be able to meet the requirements that are really outlined in each of those different laws and regulations. From there, we can then define what our overall policy is. So what are the approved platforms? What data is able to be or allowed to be collected by those platforms? How are we able to use that? Really document all of that so we can reflect it within our privacy notices or disclosures to users, making sure that we have the proper mechanisms in place in order to uphold the privacy rights that are being afforded to our users, such as access requests, deletion requests, consent or opt-in or opt-out, depending upon their location. That's that really assessment and pulling all the information that we need to understand for that platform's P. We then also need to establish different processes in order to be able to make sure that compliance and privacy requirements are always being followed. Now, when we're talking about processes, we're usually really focusing on three core aspects. The first one is any new platform review and approval process. So for any platform at that overall policy level, making sure that we understand those questions of how is it being used, who owns it, what data is being collected, what other platforms is this integrated with, how is data being shared, what's the impact of the user. Going through those assessments for any new platforms so we have that documentation in place and then can update our governance program accordingly. We also then need to have a process for any new instance of a platform or a tag that's associated with that platform being implemented on the website. So the platform is approved, but now we have individual cases where we have a new tag that is specific to a new campaign or is running for a brand new brand. We need a new instance to be put on a new website. We need a process in place to properly implement those things so that we know that we're only collecting that compliant data, as well as we're collecting holistically all the information that's necessary. Having a process in place also is critical to make sure that legacy instances and legacy tags are not left on your different digital properties in order to potentially have adverse effects in the future. Finally, we need a process for ongoing monitoring and review. So reviewing anything that's live today, making sure that no new instances of piggybacking or daisy chaining are beginning to happen from what we thought were our trusted partners, as well as no new data points are being collected just natively by these different platforms that could have privacy implications for our users. Beyond just that governance or the privacy and regulation requirement, we also want to think about governance through the lens of the data collection architecture. So for data collection architecture, how can we then think about this through that lens of the 6 Ps? So we're thinking about people. Again, individuals for the data collection architecture, making sure that we have complete and accurate information being collected. We need to have, again, a cross-functional team, or at least inputs from a few different teams. First, we need individuals from the marketing and the business side, who are the ones that are, again, defining that purpose. So what are the actions and what are the activities that we're doing as a business that we are leveraging data for? That's defined by the marketing group. The media group also is helping us understand who are we targeting, how are we targeting, and then what are the data requirements for those. And then our analytics team can aggregate those different requirements and put it more into practice for that actual implementation plan and the definition of data that needs to be collected by different platforms, how that architecture is going to look. So when we're thinking about the platforms, again, we can start with that business assessment that we've already completed. So we have a really good understanding of what are the platforms that are in place, that are in use, and that are approved within our marketing and advertising technology stack. Funneling down from that business assessment, we can then look what are the data needs for each of these platforms in order to accomplish the various different marketing and business goals that we have laid out. If we can break out those different data needs for each of those platforms that are approved and are necessary to be in use, we're going to see a lot of overlap. We're going to see a lot of different actions or activities on our websites or sections of our websites or of our applications where different platforms are looking for the exact same data and for the exact same interactions to be tracked. So we can aggregate that together within that data needs assessment, and we can translate those different needs into a data layer architecture, or an architecture of a just general data architecture on our websites and on our digital properties, from which to pull all of our approved information to make everything as straightforward and efficient as possible, while also being extremely robust to be able to have standardized information being collected across platforms, which is going to make integration much easier in the future. All of that then cascades down, or cascades up, I guess in this case, to the tag architecture, or the actual implementation of those different platforms to reference that standardized data structure, accounting for all of the different needs that we have defined. So with that, we can put the architecture in place for the various different platforms and their data needs. We then need to outline some different processes in order to be able to, again, make sure that this architecture is as optimal as possible and stays efficient on into the future. So different processes looking at data mapping and implementation. So going back to any new platform or instance deployment on a website or on a digital property, any new properties that need to be added, what that whole process looks like to get those added and make sure everything is still being collected as expected. Reporting and dashboarding. So we're getting to that insights with our own first party data, getting to that stage to begin moving into that emerging in those connected stages there. And then also foundations for integration and advanced analysis. As mentioned, if we do this data collection architecture piece of the overall governance puzzle really well, it standardizes our data structure and allows us and opens up opportunities, and is really a requirement to be able to get to that connected and multi-moment stage further on in our overall maturity journey. The final piece of governance, when we're thinking about it, again, through those actions in order to advance along that maturity journey, is through the lens of performance. So when we're talking about performance, people-wise, we're typically talking about our development teams, because that's where KPIs for site performance, page speed, things like that typically sit. Now, the implications, though, of the actions taken for performance optimization have downstream effects on our marketing groups, because performance and user experience really drives users' actions and activities, and can really drive and impact conversions later on. And it also, the actions taken there for performance optimization can have impacts on the data being collected, which obviously impact our analytics teams and our media teams. So it's really important, again, for people mostly focusing on the development teams, but there are impacts for others here. In addition, when we're looking at the platforms, again, we need to assess through more of a performance lens the different platforms that are in use. So how are each of those different tags, marketing, advertising, analytics platforms, how are they impacting overall page load times as well as user experience? We can leverage platforms such as Tag Inspector to do those different performance assessments of individual tags and individual platforms in order to be able to understand what are the most costly of these from that performance perspective. And then we also need to start thinking about weighing data collection risks versus performance improvements. A lot of the actions that can be taken in order to maybe deprioritize platforms from loading or loading them later in an overall page load sequence, they have implications for the timing of which different things load. So if your analytics platform is loading 2-3 seconds after that initial page load instance or process, yeah, you might have blazing fast page load times, but data collection is going to happen really slow, which are going to have impacts on reporting and optimization from that side of the house. So being able to weigh what is really important, what are your important platforms, what things need to be prioritized in order to have a balance between performance as well as data collection. Finally, when we're thinking about processes for performance, ongoing monitoring of just performance overall, but also connecting that to that general governance policy and even connecting it to the compliance and privacy, making sure that only approved platforms are loading, that they're only loading in the proper way, and that they're loading in the most efficient way possible when, again, thinking about the data collection architecture, referencing the central data object, not doing any scraping or any other kinds of nefarious things on a page, all play into optimizing for performance as well. So when we're talking about data governance, again, we're talking about the foundations. We're talking about the really important base level items that have to be taken care of in order to collect complete, compliant, and efficient data, which drives the overall advancing and really pushes any organization along on that overall maturity journey through those nascent, emerging, connected, and multi-moment stages.
Thank you so much, Lucas. And one more thing just to call out, as you see the models that a methodology that Lucas shared, we highly advise to think about your digital analytics journey, not from the standpoint, are we there yet? Are we there yet? But rather, do we have the right teams, and are those teams skilled in the right fashion for us to take on these new challenges? Do we have the right solutions that can help us get there? And is our organization experienced in building out these processes, or what do we need to do to put these processes together? And throughout the book, we use the same methodology to look at not just data governance, but to look at digital analytics, Google Marketing Platform, Google Cloud, Cloud Solution, through the lens of how do we actually bring ourselves as an organization to a different stage of maturity with those products, but also what do we need to change from the people standpoint in terms of how do we upskill our team or hire more people to help, and what are the processes that we need to be a successful organization actually utilizing these solutions. A couple of things just to leave you with.
Yeah, the first one here is a tag governance playbook. So you can download the link. We'll share the deck as always here following this webinar. There's a link there to download that. You can also find that on the Tag Inspector website. But what this is the tag governance playbook, and it really outlines those key processes that we had talked about here today that need to be in place for any effective tag governance program. And it also outlines the steps and kind of a general methodology that we would recommend following for that audit stage. So understanding, doing the business assessment of the different platforms that are loading across your different digital properties, and then how to walk through those different assessments specifically for CCPA, GDPR, and privacy, which can really give great examples of the groundwork and how to walk through that process to develop that foundational tag governance, just core necessary to use as a launching pad for that transformational journey of digital analytics.
The other resource that we wanted to share with you is an ebook that we published, Doing More with Less. Certainly the past 3-4 months have been challenging and unprecedented, to say the least. And many organizations have contacted us with questions. What do we do if our digital budgets are being squeezed? We do not just want to make 20-30% cuts across the board. We also do not want to stop doing our marketing. So how do we think about rebudgeting and reallocation? So we've put together also this white paper that talks about leveraging the 6P methodology to rethink where you should be spending your advertising dollars. So those 2 links are being posted in a chat box of the webinar. Hope this was valuable and helpful. We will share deck. We will share the information that has been presented today. Here's also our contact information. If you have any questions for us, we are going to be here for the next few minutes. Again, hope you found this valuable, and thank you.
Yeah, so Michael, it looks like we do have one open question within the Q&A panel. Someone asking, will the book help me better understand what stage of maturity we're in? I know you mentioned that earlier, if you want to kind of expand on that a bit.
Absolutely. The book will help you pinpoint where you are. We are also making a self-assessment available for organizations, and not just from the maturity standpoint, but it will also help you determine what you need to do to get to the next phase from the pace, payoff, people, process, and platform stage. So it will help you understand if, for example, you're in emerging stage, what are the key things that you need to be doing to get to the next stage.
Perfect. And then also a question here, might be good, I guess, for me to answer this one. When upcoming regulations, national, state, arrive later, how will InfoTrust help its partners that are affected? Which, phenomenal question. And that's one of the things where it's really important to put those processes in place around governance. So once you really understand and you have a policy in place, the list of approved platforms, then you at least have a really good grasp of everything that's happening across your digital ecosystem. So from there, you understand what platforms are in place, what data is being collected, and have a solid, efficient architecture in place. It becomes much easier to ask questions of the data that's being collected. So as new regulations are passed, new states, new countries that you might be moving into or starting to focus on, and they have different privacy regulations that are in place, all we need to do is adjust the process slightly and ask different questions of that data. But because we have it all in a very organized format, we are able to easily do so and then take whatever action steps or make whatever modifications around disclosure, notice, opt-in, opt-out, consent, all of those different requirements as necessary as new requirements evolve.
Another question about the book availability. The book will be likely fully published in August and September. Before that, we're going to be publishing an online website, which will have components of the book, different articles, different assessments. We'll make them available for people before the actual book release date, and we'll communicate with all of you about those upcoming changes and resources to help you use this even before the book is actually available. As far as where the book will be available, it's another question. It will certainly be on Amazon, and it will be on the websites of majority of book retailers. Thank you for all the questions. And again, if there are any other questions that you might have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email.